This video is brought to you by True Tales of Buried Treasure, the largest collection of old treasure magazines in the West. On our website, you can search for individual treasure stories by region, or buy our original magazines themselves. To pay us a visit, please click on the link in the description. Enjoy. There's something about a treasure that grips a man's soul. It haunts him, lingers in his thoughts every time he closes his eyes, and refuses to be forgotten until the day he dies. Conrad's words in Nostromo seem to have been written with me in mind. My life has shifted dramatically in the past few years. Now I am a man consumed by an obsession, a singular focus on uncovering a fortune hidden long ago by Spanish padres in California's Santa Maria Valley. Treasure hunting used to be about adventure, excitement, and a thrilling hobby that might bring rewards. But looking back on recent years, all I see is exhausting labor, frustration, and the strain it's placed on my patient family. Yet I continue the search, driven by an unwavering belief that this incredible treasure exists, and I'm certain of its general location. I'm sharing this story in the hopes that a reader might have valuable information about the hoard I seek, or some knowledge and experience that could help unravel this mystery of immense hidden wealth. However, it's important to note that the treasure site is on private property, and access is only possible with written permission. The prize I seek is truly a treasure, within a treasure 2 ox cart loads of gold and mission church valuables, hidden deep within a silver mine once worked by the Padres. History, research, carved signs and symbols, and our own tangible findings confirm the existence of this lost hoard. My involvement began one Saturday with a call from Don, a close friend and longtime prospecting partner. Don told me about an old school buddy, an Indian named Ben, who had asked for his help in finding an extremely valuable treasure hidden by Spanish padres. Ben's grandfather knew the general location of the treasure, which was placed in a silver mine and sealed with an old iron and wood door from a mission. Much of the wealth had been stored in one of several local missions until it could be safely transferred to a Spanish galleon in San Diego Harbor. Don explained that the treasure was hidden in the mine during a time of turmoil when Spanish forces were overthrown, followed by a period of confiscation and destruction. Many missions were forced to make quick decisions to protect their priceless possessions. Eventually, the Padres were banished, the missions abandoned, and the Indians were driven back to the deserts and mountains. Naturally, Don wanted me to join him and Ben in consulting Ben's grandfather for more details about the treasure's location. At first, I protested, citing my poor luck in prospecting and the foolishness of chasing after what seemed like a mirage. But Don's optimism wore down my resistance, and I agreed to hear the story from the old man himself. Ben's grandfather, a warm and friendly man of 90 who lived in Colton, resembled the Indian on a buffalo nickel. After introductions and assurances of integrity, the old man settled back to tell his tale, a story passed down from his bedridden aunt 70 years ago. The Indian woman's story, as told by Ben's grandfather, was this. Many years ago, when I was a girl, I lived at a mission with other Indians not far from the ocean. Once a week, I was chosen to go with other women into the hills to prepare meals for the Padre and some Indians working in a very rich silver mine. We were never allowed inside the mine, but we could watch the men from a large flat rock where we prepared the meals. We usually stayed at the site for 3 days. Near the mine's entrance was another large flat rock with a carved cross in the center. The long part of the cross pointed towards the mine entrance. One day, back at the mission, I heard that a great amount of gold had arrived. The gold was being kept at the mission until a big ship could come to take it away. I learned that the gold had been brought from a great distance on mules. One day, while I was preparing meals at the mine, a messenger from the mission came rushing into the camp, visibly excited. He went straight to the Padre and delivered a message. The Padre quickly gathered all of us, and we began our journey back down the path toward the mission. On our way, we encountered another Padre and 2 Indians I recognized from our mission. Accompanying them were 2 ox carts pulled by burros, and behind them, 2 more burros were dragging an iron door. I had seen this door several times before at the mission. It was made of iron and wood. Even though the carts were partially covered, I couldn't help but glance inside one as we passed by. I caught a glimpse of a large amount of gold and several silver candlestick holders. I didn't get a chance to look inside the other cart. At the time, none of this seemed important to me. We had been taught by the padres that such items belonged only to God and that possessing them would mean the loss of our souls. We were also told many times that approaching the mine without a padre would result in the same fate. When we reached the mission, we heard rumors of fighting nearby and learned that the padres were preparing to leave for a distant land. The next day, the same padre and 2 Indians returned, but this time without the carts. I later discovered that they had hidden the gold and silver in the mine and sealed it with the iron door. A few days later, many men arrived on horseback and took all of us deep into the Arizona desert, where we were left to live with other Indians. I never learned what became of the padres, but I believe they were either killed or sent far away. After telling her story, the woman had given Ben's grandfather a rough idea of where the mine was located. No matter how much he pleaded, she refused to lead him there, not because of her illness, but out of fear. And that's the whole story, the old man concluded. I'll give you the directions I have for finding the cross carved into the rock. If you locate it, remember that the long part of the cross points toward the mine entrance. I went down there once years ago, but I couldn't find the exact spot. The old man paused and smiled. Maybe I'm a little superstitious myself, he said. He then reached into his pocket, pulled out a $20 bill and handed it to Ben. I don't have much money, but this might help a little, he said. I'd like to go with you, but I'm too old to be hiking around in the hills. His contribution to our search fund convinced me there might be some truth to the story. After considering our options and checking our finances, we decided to spend a couple of weeks searching for the large flat rock with the cross carved into it. The 3 of us, Don, Ben, and I took leave from our jobs and headed to the small town of Ramona, where we planned to stock up on supplies. We spent the night at Ramona's only hotel, and the next morning, we stocked up on groceries for the week. After getting some local directions, we drove several miles down a dirt road, looking for a specific mountain that served as a landmark. We spotted it about 10 miles out of town, and a few more miles brought us to our destination. We set up camp, and the next morning we began our systematic search. We divided the area into zones, planning to thoroughly explore each one before moving on to the next. After 4 days of methodical searching, we had found little more than a few arrowheads and pieces of broken pottery. On the 5th day, Don discovered a quartz vein containing several pieces of dark tourmaline. Although San Diego County is known for its abundance of gemstones, we didn't think this discovery was significant to the treasure's location. However, the gemstones were nice finds that lifted our spirits. On the 7th day, I was walking through a grove of large ancient oak trees when I noticed a carving on one of them. It appeared to depict an old mission. On the opposite side of the tree was another carving, a cross with a square at its base. About 80 feet away, we found yet another carving, a detailed owl, slightly faded with time but still clearly visible. Interestingly, one of the owl's eyes was intentionally carved higher than the other. It was obvious these symbols were very old. We spent the rest of the day searching the area and trying to interpret the carvings, but it wasn't until 3 days later that we found another clue. On the 11th day, we discovered the rock with the cross carved into it. Don and I were walking together when we came across a dry stream bed. Don pointed out 2 large boulders resting on a huge flat rock in the center of the wash. Upon closer inspection, we realized that the boulders were covering a carving on the rock beneath them. With some effort, the 3 of us managed to roll the boulders back a few feet, revealing the cross. The long arm of the cross pointed toward the bank of the wash several feet away. After the initial excitement and daydreams of spending the millions we believed we'd uncover, we began digging in the direction indicated by the cross. However, after a few hours of digging in the hot sun, Don suggested we rent a metal detector. We all agreed, and Don and Ben left for San Bernardino to get the detector and try to raise more funds, as we were running low. The next morning, while Don and Ben were away, I returned to the treasure site to continue exploring. Following the stream bed uphill, I came upon an old rock dam about 100 feet from the site. At the base of the dam was a large boulder with a perfectly carved arrow, missing its shaft. The arrow seemed to point toward the stream bank to the right of the dam. However, it was possible the boulder had shifted over time, and the arrow might have originally pointed downstream toward the rock with the cross. I was certain the dam had been used as a water stop or diverter by the Padres during their work. Elated by this discovery, I spent the rest of the day probing around the dam. Nightfall was unwelcome, as my excitement would have kept me searching and digging around the clock. The next morning, Don and Ben arrived with both the metal detector and additional funds. They agreed that the dam, along with the rock and carved arrow, indicated some kind of activity had taken place there. Our morale was high as we headed up the hill toward the treasure site with the metal detector. It was a large device, capable of detecting objects up to 30 feet deep. After testing the detector to ensure it was working correctly, we focused on the spot where the long arm of the cross pointed. The detector reacted immediately, its earphones shrieking and the needle swinging all the way over. We tested the detector in other locations, but the response was negative everywhere else. Our excitement was beyond words. We were certain that within a few hours of digging, we would be 3 wealthy men. We began digging right away. The sun was high and the temperature soared to nearly 105 degrees, but the heat didn't dampen our enthusiasm. We erected a lean-to for shade and kept working. Progress was slow, as the ground was mostly decomposed granite, making digging difficult. After 2 hours of steady work, we had only dug down to a depth of 3 feet. We continued digging until nightfall, by which time our shaft had reached about 7 feet deep. That night, as we gathered around the campfire, we decided to switch tactics. Digging with picks and shovels had become nearly impossible, so we opted to use light charges of dynamite. The next morning, we procured the explosives from Ramona and spent the day setting off charges and clearing out the debris with shovels. By the end of the day, we had reached a depth of 11 feet too deep to continue using shovels, but the metal detector's readings remained unchanged. To keep going, we constructed a windlass and resumed our work. After 2 more days of intense labor, we had a hole 24 feet deep, but still no sign of the treasure. The following morning, we decided to spend a few hours checking for other potential leads before returning to the main site. We knew we would have to return the metal detector soon due to the rental cost, so we wanted to cover as much ground as possible. Within 2 hours, we made 2 significant discoveries. First, the detector led us to an old hand-forged pick buried 2 feet under the dry stream bed, about 30 feet from our dig site. The rusted head of the tool was broken into 2 pieces, held together by iron studs. One side bore a symbol, a letter V, with a Y inside it. Later, with the help of the Los Angeles County Museum, we confirmed that the pick was of Spanish origin, likely around 120 years old. I still have this old tool, with its badly decomposed handle still intact. The second major find of the morning came when I was probing around some dirt mounds on the left side of the large rock with the carved cross. My Irwin probe struck something solid, and we uncovered 3 large blocks of cut rock, apparently from a vein of quartz and feldspar, with traces of garnet and tourmaline. We theorized that the Padres might have used such blocks to construct a treasure vault. Everything seemed to be falling into place, and we felt certain we had found the true location of the treasure. We were confident that the hole we were digging was directly over the treasure room. We speculated that the entrance might be closer to the stream bed's edge, and the angle of elevation suggested the treasure vault could be as deep as 40 feet. Deciding to use a heavier charge of dynamite, we drilled an auger hole and set off the blast, but it only produced a pile of loose dirt. We spent the afternoon clearing out the debris. Recalling that the Indian woman had told Ben's grandfather that the women could see the men working from the spot where they prepared meals, we set out to find that location. Ben discovered it around noon the next day, a large table-like rock about 100 yards from the carved stone. There were 3 round bowls ground into the rock, and the area was littered with pieces of broken pottery. From our vantage point on the table rock, we could see the hole we had dug except for where a large bush blocked the view. This had to be the spot the Indian woman had described. This latest discovery boosted our spirits immensely. We spent the rest of the afternoon digging in the hole, expecting to break through to the treasure room at any moment. By the end of the day, we had deepened the hole by 4 more feet, The money pit, as we had begun calling it, was now 32 feet deep and 6 feet wide. The next couple of days were spent digging, probing, and clearing out the money pit. At 42 feet deep, we decided to take a break. All of us were beginning to feel discouraged, as we thought we should have reached the treasure room by now. Seeking a respite from our work and disappointment, we drove to Ramona. While there, we heard about a local man who was reputed to have the gift of operating a divining rod, a forked willow stick that could supposedly locate water. What intrigued us most was the claim that this old gentleman could also locate mineral deposits with this simple instrument. We tracked down the divining rod man, and after several demonstrations, he convinced us that he could indeed detect metal as well as water with his willow stick. He agreed to our offer of a 10% share of anything valuable that might be uncovered through his efforts. The next morning, the old man arrived at our camp and wasted no time with his divining rod. He first checked the rock with the carved cross, but the forked willow branch remained still. Then he moved on to our digging site, where the stick pulled down slightly. However, the old water witch was unimpressed. He explained that if a treasure room were below, the stick would have pulled down violently. Instead, the stick's reaction suggested a small mineral vein. While he didn't completely dismiss the possibility of treasure, he cautioned that it would be a small jackpot if it existed. He wanted to check the entire area before giving his final opinion. After about 2 hours of searching, the old man called to us from across the dry wash, nearly opposite our dig site. The divining rod was practically twisting out of his grip. He assured us that whatever was down there was no more than 15 feet deep, and it wasn't water. He was so confident in his find that he offered to buy the dynamite and do all the digging himself. The area was covered with brush, and we were pretty sure we hadn't scanned that particular spot with the metal detector. Since we no longer had a detector, the old man directed us to a place in nearby Escondido where we could rent one. We rented the detector for $20 for a week. By the time it arrived, we had already dug a 5-foot hole, and the detector gave us a fairly high reading. Not as high as the original location, but enough to spur us into action. The old diviner's optimism kept our spirits high. Despite being at least 70, his energy and stamina made the three of us look sluggish in comparison. By the end of the day, the hole was 12 feet deep and 6 feet wide. We continued digging, but at a depth of 17 feet, we encountered a slab of solid granite. This set off a series of unfortunate events. First, we were all discouraged because the old man had claimed the object we sought wouldn't be more than 15 feet below the surface. Even he began to show signs of doubt. The following morning, he arrived at our camp early to inform us that his sister, who lived back east, had passed away, and he needed to leave immediately. The next unfortunate incident sent me to the hospital. We decided to try blasting through the granite slab, but the explosion unexpectedly sent debris flying in our direction. I had to jump down a steep embankment, which resulted in a painful back injury. While I spent 2 months in a veterans hospital in San Francisco, Ben returned to his old job in Riverside, and Don joined a crew at a cement plant. We all agreed to meet again in a few months to give the treasure hunt another try. After my discharge from the hospital, I headed to Riverside, where I found Don working at a local golf club. Ben was now married and living in Sacramento, busy with a job he was reluctant to jeopardize by taking a leave of absence. Don's job was pretty good too, so he suggested we work on the treasure project during his days off. As for me, I was eager to get back to the search, full of new ideas and theories. Since I didn't have a car, Don drove me to our old camp, where he planned to join me on his off days. As far as we could tell, nothing at the camp had been disturbed. I spent a lonely night after Don left, reminiscing about our old campfire jokes and laughter. Eventually, I fell asleep, dreaming of iron doors and treasure vaults. During my time in the hospital, I had spent hours pondering the possibility that something might be buried beneath the big rock with the carved cross. Determined to explore this, I began digging next to the rock and, after 2 days, had reached a depth of 11 feet. At 12 feet, I hit a solid granite ledge and started to regret ever hearing about the treasure. But on the 4th day, I made a discovery that erased all my doubts. After finishing breakfast, I was heading up the hill to the treasure site when I noticed a piece of pottery sticking out of the ground. It was a sizable fragment, and I had to dig down about 6 inches to free it. As I lifted the pottery, a dirt-encrusted object fell back into the hole. When I cleaned it off, I could hardly believe my eyes. I was holding a miniature bell, about 3 inches tall, with an inscription in Latin. I could make out the date 1830 on the bell. Later, with the help of a Catholic priest, I deciphered the inscription, which included the name of the bell's maker and the traditional phrase, "The year of our Lord, 1830. Excited by this find, Don took a leave of absence from his job and managed to obtain a metal detector. We returned to the treasure site, going over the area thoroughly. Unfortunately, all we found was an old mule shoe. After several days, our funds were nearly depleted, and we were forced to face the inevitable calling it quits, at least for the time being, and getting back to our regular jobs. I tried to settle into a conventional, family-oriented life, but I couldn't stop thinking about the Santa Maria Valley and its elusive treasure. The thought that we might have missed the hoard by only a few feet, and the fear that someone else might find it haunted me. Though I minimized my treasure hunting activities, I still made frequent trips to the valley. Weeks turned into months, and months into years, with nothing significant developing after finding the bell. Then, about 2 years ago, I promised my wife that it would be my last trip to the treasure site. While there, I spotted an object in the fork of an old oak tree about 300 yards from the original site. It turned out to be a rock, almost completely encased by the tree, making it impossible to remove. This area was one of the few places not covered in our previous searches. About 100 yards from the first oak, I found another rock similarly trapped in a tree. I spent many hours with my detector in this area, but nothing else turned up. I can only assume these rocks are old trail markers, further tangible evidence of the treasure's existence. My most recent trip to the valley was both rewarding and frustrating. I made another significant discovery that caused me to slightly revise my theory about the treasure's location. While chasing a wounded rabbit through a tangled area of manzanita and brush, I came face to face with an old, burned crucible, a cup-like container used for melting metals. This find led me to consider that the Padres silver mine might be in this area. I also picked up a couple of loose samples that showed good evidence of silver. However, due to time constraints and the dense brush, I couldn't give the area a thorough search. I'm planning another trip soon and will find a way to penetrate that brush and examine every inch of the area. The old Padres hid their treasure well, but I'm far from giving up. And while this determination may lead to a divorce, I know the treasure is out there somewhere. With the proper reading of signs and symbols, the aid of new electronic detectors, and possibly some heavy equipment, I will solve the mystery of the elusive treasure of Santa Maria Valley. Thanks for watching. If you'd like to read the original article or purchase the magazine from which it was taken, please check out our website, truetalesofburiedtreasure.com.